And ultimately, Brazil, we've already seen it as a country that puts on a great show.
Yes.
We've seen that so often. Let's go to Alex in New York. Alex, what do you make of the point that Fabio was making about the cost of these games? Can Brazil afford this at this time?
I think that he raises a very good point. When Brazil won the right to hold these games back in 2009, the feeling was very different. As your correspondent pointed out, the economy was booming, and there was this incredible optimism about the country's future and a feeling that, it could do anything. And the reality turned out to be quite different. Rather than showing off its progress toward developed nation status, Brazil is revealing itself still to have a lot of problems. It's not a rich country. It's not a poor country, but it's a country with a lot of poor people in it. And I think the urgent question is, when you talk about spending hundreds of millions of dollars just on sporting facilities for an event like this, was that the best use of that money? The other fact of the Olympic spending is that, I think there was a vision of how the Olympics could transform Rio into a more modern city and a more inclusive city. But in the end, a disproportionate amount of the budget was poured into a wealthy suburb called Barra da Tijuca, where 300,000 mostly well-to-do people live. This is a city of 12 million people. 1 in 7 live in favelas, and they have desperate infrastructure needs. The single most expensive Olympic project is a nearly $3 billion subway line that connects Barra, this wealthy suburb, to Ipanema, which is a fancy, lovely beachside neighborhood. Meanwhile, there's a cheaper subway extension that's been on the drawing board for a long time in the working class north side of the city that, didn't get built. So I think it's very legitimate and even urgent to analyze how the money was spent and to think about how that money could be spent better.
Leo, what do you make of these concerns that you've been hearing? Did Brazil have to perform something of a balancing act here? On the one hand, the Olympic Games, or the World Cup for that matter, affords any country in the world a huge opportunity to market itself to the world. It's a great PR exercise. So did Brazil have to balance that against the fact that, well, it may not have had the money to produce these games, or the money could have been spent elsewhere?
Yeah, I think that's a very important point. Brazil, before launching the games, making the opening ceremony, I've read actually that Brazil will be much more, will make a much more humble opening ceremony, which is in line with its political and economic situation right now. I think that some of the points that we've been discussing here are very important, such as the investments in infrastructure to the poor neighborhoods, to the favelas, to the slums. I think Brazil still has a way to go in terms of infrastructure. We've been talking much about the legacy of the Olympics. We're yet to understand and to see the benefits of the World Cup. But I've seen some studies, some researchers that point, one of them from FGV says that the income of residents of Rio have risen 30.3% from 2009 to 2016, just before the games were announced, and that the games were announced in Rio. So we're starting to see some little changes. I'm not sure if those changes are enough to justify the amount of money that is being spent in this event, given the urgent needs that Rio City has in other less privileged areas. But I do think it's more an opportunity to Brazil to think itself. Suspended President Dilma Rousseff, the Olympics was its baby, and now she's not taking much care of it because she can't.
Right.
And interim President Michel Temer has a challenge in his hands. So it sounds like it's a problem that nobody wants to take care of, and we need to figure it out, because on this depends much of the future of Rio.
Fabio, we've been hearing about a lot of the concerns concerning these games. You've raised those concerns yourself, but are we perhaps being a little bit too fixated on the problems and the challenges that Brazil faces, rather than looking at the positive side of things and looking at something like these games, which does afford a country a huge opportunity to show itself off to the world?
Honestly, I think the main benefits will be felt specifically and perhaps only by the people who will be providing services to the specific time, during the specific time of the Olympics. Remembering that this amount of money that was spent with the World Cup and with the Olympic Games are the equivalent to the whole budget for health in this whole country for a year. And as Leo pointed out, we're a country with urgent needs that should be addressed first, before thinking about hosting such a huge event with public money. I'm not against the Olympics. I'm only against Olympics being hosted with public money. There was a mention about the infrastructure projects that were made possible by the Olympics. But my question is, do we really need Olympic Games to understand that some infrastructure projects are needed? Or were they built specifically to serve the Olympics, and after that they will be left behind, as it happened with several of the stadiums that were built across the country for the World Cup? I think this will serve as a cautionary tale for other countries. I think actually this is already serving as a cautionary tale, as Greece has served for us. Greece was a country, better off with its financial situation, and after the Olympics, it began a whole period of financial bankruptcy. And Brazil is already on the verge of bankruptcy right now, and after the Olympics are gone, I fear that the situation will even get worse.
What do you think, Rafael?
I think, for example, the points that Alex brought up are very important, specifically on the question of choices where you're going to invest and how you're going to invest this in Rio specifically. But in the end, and as a Rio citizen and someone that was brought up in the city, when I look at the new options of public transportation beyond the metro system to Barra, which is the largest growing part of Rio right now, along with Santa Cruz and Campo Grande. The BRT system is something Rio de Janeiro citizens had never had. Now, is that a suboptimal solution? Of course it is. It would much be preferable to have had a light rail system doing mass transportation throughout the west zone of Rio, integrated to models that go into mass bus lines that give capillarity to a public transport system, much like the old car system that Rio had before the 1950s. Unfortunately, that choice was not made, and a suboptimal choice was made. But will people be better past the Olympics because of that suboptimal choice? Yes, they will. Would it have been better to expand the second line of the metro into Praça 15 to link up with the boat system that takes you to Niterói, and then expand the fourth line of the metro into Niterói past the Guanabara Bay? Yes, it probably would have been better as well. But that would still leave out the fact that Barra da Tijuca is likely one of the fastest growing areas of the city, and most Rio de Janeiro citizens work in downtown Rio. So they still have to go through 2 to 3 hour commutes.
Right. The mayor of Rio has been very upbeat about these games. Well, he's going to be upbeat. He's the mayor of Rio. And he says there are parts of the city, and he referred to the old part, the port of the city, which has been neglected. And it's getting attention now because the games are coming to Rio.
Yeah, well, the port area of Rio de Janeiro, most like specifically the Gamboa area and Praça Mauá areas, are traditional areas of Rio and where Rio began as a city, in a sense. That's why you'd find the world's largest slave importation port is in that area, the port of Valonguinho, and they found it during construction for the Verité and reurbanization of the area, because that's where Rio City started. And yes, it was neglected for the better part of 40 years. However, the type of renovation that was envisioned for this area is much like a Barcelona-type renovation, where you're bringing up a downbeat part of the city and you're middle-classing it. In a sense, you're bringing in businesses, you're bringing in your more avant-garde part of society to this area in order to increase real estate prices. And that itself has a neglect that has been touched upon here in a sense, where a lot of the lower class citizens of Rio have suffered from that, either through rising rents or having to move forcefully so that renovations could be done.
Right. Leo, I just have a little bit of time left, but I want to ask you about the games itself. I mean, is Rio expecting a large influx of visitors, and is the country and the city itself ready for this influx of not just the visitors, of course, there's thousands of athletes who will be there as well?
Yeah, in fact, 80% of the tickets for the Olympics were already sold. I think Brazil is somewhat divided, and the pessimists and the optimists, and it relates to the political situation that we have. And remember, the coming of the Olympics to Rio was mostly a political decision. And at the time, we decided that we wanted to have the Olympic Games hosted in Brazil and in Rio. We had a much different situation, economically speaking and politically speaking. And now we have this challenging situation. But I do think that there's time for Brazilians to get a bit more optimistic. You know, the same thing, a similar thing happened in the World Cup. Everyone, or a lot of people, were just pessimistic about the works
right.
at the major stadiums. But when the games began, everyone was cheering for their team. So my concern is that we as Brazilians may forget the challenges that we have and just look at the games.
And enjoy the games. We're going to have to leave it there. Thanks to all of you for joining us. That's all we have time for, but our Olympics coverage is just beginning, of course. For the latest from Rio, check our website at cctv-america.com/Olympics. As we leave you, China has 416 athletes at the Rio Olympics. That's the largest delegation they've sent to a foreign games. They'll be competing in 210 events across 26 sports. CCTV spoke to some of the athletes getting ready to step into the spotlight.
Seeing the 5 rings makes me nervous. Pressures and a sense of responsibility keeps growing. As a result, I may lose my appetite and cannot sleep well sometimes.
Surprising to me that I can participate in another Olympics. I retired after competing at the 2008 Games because I had to. I got married and gave birth to a baby. After 2012, I think I had fully accepted the idea of retirement. This year, I will compete in 2 different shooting events.
I feel all right. I'm not that excited. I want to treat it like a regular competition, like I do in the World Cup and World Championships. I don't feel nervous now, but I might be the night before the event.
We should be mentally prepared first, because the Olympics is the highest level of competition in the world. We'll fight hard in every minute, for every ball and during every game.
I have thought over all the difficulties. Only if you face up to difficulties can you challenge them. I don't think it's necessary to think about the result. What I need to do is to pay attention to the course of events. If my partner and I can perform our dives well, I think we will get close to the gold medal.